Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, he saw this great crowd of people. They were gathered around him. And he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened up his mouth and he began to teach. He began by saying this. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." When we get to this point, this place in time, the people are at a new place, and they are ready for an incredible transformation. I mean, when you think about it, think of the last lesson in the Old Testament. We see in Malachi, he says, he will restore the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. So I will not come and smite the land with a curse. The New Testament, however, begins with this dramatic change, this word blessed, this blessingness. In the Old Testament, we see the law, and we see Mount Sinai, and we see thunder and lightning. We see judgment and cursing. In the New Testament, we see Jesus, and he is bringing us grace and peace and blessing. You see, Jesus' message, it absolutely devastates worldly attitudes. And the question is, why? And that's because you cannot fill an empty man's soul with external things. I mean, think about this analogy of Solomon. He was magnificent in his earthly array. Again, as we talked about yesterday, or we talked about on Sunday, he was the wealthiest person on earth, and he was the wisest person on earth. And yet, he had all of this splendiferous arraignment, or what you call it. But he was never happy. And that's why he said, vanity unto vanities, all is vanity, in Ecclesiastes 1:2. The lesson here is that you can never use physical things to touch the soul. What are some of the things that we use to touch or try to erase our pain? We use wealth, we use sex, we use drugs, we use alcohol, we use material possessions. In contrast to that, Jesus comes on the scene and he says this. He opened his mouth and he began to teach. And he was telling them how to be fulfilled. He said, "Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So why does Jesus begin with this poor in spirit? Because the only way to come to God is to confess unrighteousness, to confess the inability to meet God's standards. We have to confess it. We can't do it in and of ourselves or in our flesh. And that's why Jesus started right there. So what kind of poverty is this? We have poverty all around us. Jesus said, the poor you will always have with you. But he's talking about this type of poverty where you can't depend on anything else. You can't depend on yourself. That word in the Greek is called tokes, P-T-O-K-E-S, which describes the situation. And the closest I can get to that is my little child Judith. She's such a sweet little innocent thing. She's so tiny, and she can't do anything for herself. She can't dress herself. She can't even feed herself. She can't grab things yet. That's the kind of dependence that this poor in spirit is talking about. In Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14, he told this parable about some of the people who trusted in themselves and that they were righteous, and they viewed others with contempt. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and was praying this to himself. He said, I thank you that I am not like the other people, swindlers, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector over here. I fast twice a week. I pray, I tithe all that I get. But the tax collector standing there, some distance away, was not even willing to look up, saying, God, be merciful to me, the sinner. I tell you, This man went to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted. So Jesus is saying this: happy are you when you are empty, bankrupt, and you cringe in a corner crying out for mercy. You see, God identifies with those who beg on the inside. God puts it this way in Isaiah 66:2. But to this one I will look, to him who is humble and contrite in spirit, and who trembles at my word. Well, how about this one in Psalm 34:18? The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Or Psalm 51:17. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. Oh God, you will not despise. So here's a definition of being poor in spirit. It means no self-sufficiency. It's a poverty that causes our will to bow down in deep dependence upon God through submission. So you really have to ask yourself, how do I become poor in spirit? Well, first of all, don't try to do it yourself. You have to look to God. Read his word, face his person, and look at Christ. Meditate on God and his word. These are daily practical exercises that we should be doing. Second thing we should do is starve our flesh. Starve the flesh. You see, our carnal nature is saturating our mind. But when you fill your mind with Scripture, when you saturate your mind with Scripture and prayer and fellowship and worship, it turns all of that around. That's how you begin to starve your flesh. Third thing, you need to ask God, meaning you need to beg. So then how will we know when we are poor in spirit? Well, just like with everything, you have to take inventory. When you know you're running low on supplies in your house, or you know that you're running out of juice in your refrigerator, you just make provision for that. You know. They even have refrigerators now that can tell you with a smart app when you're running out of things. So the first thing you need to do, how you will know you're poor in spirit after you've taken this inventory, is you will be weaned from yourself. Psalm 131 verse 2 says, surely I've composed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child rests against his mother, my soul is like a weaned child within me. All you think about, everything that your mind is consumed with is God. Secondly, you will be lost in the wonder of Christ, gazing at his glory. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says this, but we all with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit. Third, you will never complain about your situation. Why? Because you realize that you don't deserve anything. In fact, the deeper you go, the sweeter the grace. The more you need, the more God provides. Fourth, you will see only the excellencies of others and only your weaknesses. Truly humble is the one who has to look up to everyone else. Number 5, you will find yourself spending much time in prayer. Why? Because a beggar is always begging. He knocks often at heaven's gate and doesn't let go until he's blessed, like Jacob wrestling with God. Number 6, you will be taking Christ on his terms. You see, the proud Christian wants Jesus plus pleasure, plus covetousness and immorality. The one who is poor in spirit is so desperate that he will give up everything, anything, to get to Christ. Lord, what will thou have me to do? And number 7, you will be praising and thanking God for his grace. So then, if I had to really just put this all in a word, oh, the happiness happiness of the man who has realized his own utter helplessness and who has put his whole trust in God. For thus alone he can render to God that perfect obedience which will make him a citizen of the kingdom